If we look at the amount of games that were released on the PlayStation over its lifespan, there are quite a number that definitely stand out, but there are also a ton of games that many of us never heard about. And if we look at the Japanese lineup of games, there's even more games out there that we still have yet to discover. It's crazy to think that there's so many games out there that we still don't know about, but luckily with emulation and with online resources today, we do have the ability and a way to try out these games if we want to. Yes, we can go down the road of buying copies of these games on the likes of eBay and various gaming marketplaces, although many of them, because they're so rare, they're also quite expensive, which won't appeal or be suitable or affordable for everybody. So emulation will be your next alternative. So if you are interested in playing many of these games, they are worth a look just for that alone. But in saying that, there are some hidden gems, but there are also other games that don't reinvent the wheel and don't provide anything new to the landscape of the console, but they have enough unique quirks about them to at least be worth a try. One of the games that we'll be looking at in this list was released back in 1996 for the PlayStation in Japan only, which is known as Extra Bright, which acts as a 3D rail shooter game that gives access to at least 7 different stages where you play like with a ship, and your goal is literally just to go through each of the levels and to defeat all of the enemies using a variety of different weapons, rockets, explosives, laser cannons, where you have to defeat enemies and eliminate end of level bosses in order to progress to the next stage. In between each stage, you are met with a video sequence featuring many different anime characters, as the game was based off of like an anime cartoon show or film back at that time in Japan. So the game acts as kind of like a spin-off to that show, if you will, in many ways. Now, there is very little known about the game with regards to information online, but there are a few articles that you can find that have done reviews of the game, and in many cases the game was stated to be very generic in what it offered, because the game is heavily limited in its play style, as again it is just a rail shooter, but it is a very simplistic one at that. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, nor does it try to do anything overly new, and in many cases you will complete the game in less than an hour. It's not overly long to get through. The longest parts of the game itself are its movie sequences to play out at the start of the game and towards each level or at the end of each level of the game. The levels themselves, you'll have them done in about 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes even less, depending on how many enemies you can defeat in a quick time frame. The game is entirely in 3D, but it's very linear in its approach. There's no alternate pathways or anything else that you can do. You just go from path A to path B and destroy everything in between. And some levels will be more difficult than others because you will die at certain points, but you can continue as many times pretty much as you want until you reach your goal. But from the articles that are available online, the one thing that is common with it is that the graphics are very simplistic, as again it is an early 3D game that was released in early 1996 for the PlayStation. It's very bright, vibrant, colourful, very cartoony, but it's just the gameplay is very repetitive because it just has you doing pretty much the same thing over and over again. But what can you expect with these type of games? That is the nature of them. They are repetitive. Like if you've played any of the best rail shooters or side-scrolling shooters or anything like that, even like beat 'em ups or any other genre, the chances are they're going to be repetitive to some degree. Some games will stand out compared to others because they do have some distinctive quirks and elements that really make them definable amongst a sea of other games. But essentially they all have some sort of repetitive elements in them. There's no denying that. Like in many ways they're not reinventing the wheel at all. They're just taking elements of what has already worked and they're trying to put their own spin on it. And that's essentially what it is, because like with games and even with most things in this world, there is no original ideas. Everything is based off something else or a combination of other things that have come before it. But still, it's cool to see these type of games. The fact is that they were showing up at that time. They had a distinctive idea that they wanted to try, and I always say that like this era of games, because it was the early transition from 2D to 3D games, this was the perfect time for developers to really experiment with their ideas. Yeah, some of them ended up being massive successes, others were kind of mediocre to say the least, and then others would fall by the wayside, never to really be seen again. But they were experiments, and they tried them. They weren't afraid to try them. Whether they failed or they succeeded, it didn't matter. At least they're there, and we have the opportunity to try them, especially now today. So with the concept with Extra Bright, it is simple. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to make a massive difference in the gaming landscape. It's like many other games that came before it, even after it. It's very simplistic in how it approaches itself. I wouldn't set your expectations too high as to what you can get from the game, because it is quite short. Everything is also in Japanese, just to be aware of that as well. So if you can't speak the language, you probably will struggle, but the truth is the game's very easy to get into. It's not complicated to figure out what to do next, how to proceed into the next level. It's very straightforward. If anything, that's definitely the game's highlight. It doesn't overcomplicate things. It just gets straight into the next sequence straight away so that you can just continue playing. Now, it'll be a game that'll be for some people that like these type of characteristics, but it won't be for everybody. But it's still an interesting idea in many regards, because again, it is an early game, but not everybody will like it. That's all I'm going to say. But it will appeal to a select few. It all starts and ends with you. You make that decision. You make that choice. I found even from playing it, I liked certain elements of it. I loved the anime kind of quirkiness to the movie sequences, although some of them are quite long. And the level design themselves, at first glance, seems to be promising, but yes, I can agree that it does get repetitive quite quickly. But that's not to say that it's a bad game. It's not a bad game at all. It just definitely won't appeal to many. That's all I'll say. Now, there are different difficulty levels in the game, both beginner, medium and hard, so if you really wanted to test yourself, you could do that. But the chances are, if you played this game once, you probably won't play it again, because once you got through the campaign, that'll be pretty much it. But I still think it's worth a try at least, because the campaign's not overly long. You'll complete it in less than an hour, like I said. So to experience something that goes way back to the early days of the PlayStation, especially from the Japanese region, which has a ton of games that, like I said, many of us don't really know about, these games are still worth a try. They're still an interesting find to look at in many regards. So I would recommend just to have a go, just to see what you think for yourself. But if you have played this game already, or if you do know anything about it, then I would love to hear your thoughts of this game and what you think of it overall. So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other unusual and quirky style games like this that were also released on the PlayStation, you can also check out some of the other videos I've covered on the channel previously, and you can also check out some of the other videos here on screen that will show more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.